as we begin this video, let's take a look at this picture that represents a relatively typical forest ecosystem in interior Canada. In the previous video, we learned that an ecosystem consists not only of all of the living populations together, that being the different communities of organisms that inhabit a specific environment, but also includes all of the non-living components of that environment as well. Now, the living components, all of the organisms that we see in this ecosystem, are what we call the biotic components of the ecosystem, and we know that these are living because of the prefix bio that indicates that we're referring to living things. So just a few examples of biotic components that we see in this picture here. We can see that there are a couple of bears. They are definitely alive. We can see that there's a deer drinking from the water. That's definitely alive. And in the water, we can see a fish jumping in and out of the water, and we can see that there's a turtle. They're both definitely alive. And of course, we cannot forget the plants. Without plants, none of these animals would be able to survive. So trees that we see in this forest are obviously examples of biotic components as well. Now, you don't need me to point out everything that should be alive in this picture here, because that's not the complete ecosystem that we're looking at. We need to consider the non-living components of the ecosystem, which are what we call the abiotic factors. Again, bio is the prefix that means living, and A here is a negative prefix, so this means that we're looking at non-living factors. Now, we can see most of the animals in this ecosystem are all clustered around this little stream and pond, so we can say that water is a very important abiotic factor in this ecosystem here. Now, at the bottom of the water, we can see that there is sand. Now, we can see that there's this crab that has made a burrow where the sand is acting as its home, but the sand is also trapping this water here and stopping the water from draining down. So without this sand, none of these animals would be able to find water to drink. Now, we know that all of these animals are alive because they must have air to breathe from the atmosphere, because without oxygen, all of them would be dead. And we see that this picture takes place during the daytime, meaning that there must be some sort of sunlight that is making it through and illuminating all of the organisms here. So all of these are definitely not alive, but are no less important to allow this ecosystem to exist. So the purpose of this video is to examine the different ways that organisms can interact with each other and interact with the non-living components of their ecosystem in order to be able to survive. Now, in order to talk about this, we need to talk about a word that is frequently used and misused in evolutionary biology, that being to adapt or having adaptations. So in ecology, organisms that are well adapted to living in their environment are organisms that are able to survive and to reproduce to allow their children or their offspring to survive in the next generation. And there are basically two components to determining whether an organism is well adapted to its environment. Whether the organism is able to find food, and in addition to food that it needs for growth and making energy, also being able to find water in order to be able to, replenish its water supply. Organisms that can do these two things are defined as well adapted to their environment. But of course, if each organism wants to survive into the next generation, they are going to need to find a mate to reproduce with, have offspring, and have their offspring survive as well. So in this video, we're going to talk about the different roles that organisms can use to adapt in order to survive in a specific ecosystem. And when we discuss this, we are talking about an organism's ecological niche. So niche is a word that many people aren't going to be familiar with, but niche is a word that basically means role, or what the organism does, or what its purpose, if you will, in its ecosystem is. And there are generally a small number of components that allows an organism to survive in a specific ecological niche. Part of it is how that organism finds food. What does it eat, and what techniques does it use to find what it eats? But of course, unless you're an animal like a human, most other organisms will need to avoid being eaten, meaning that they'll need specific adaptations to avoid predators. And of course, there are more complex interactions that exist between different organisms that don't involve eating and being eaten, and these complex interactions determine what the organism's niche is. And again, all of these contribute to how an organism is able to survive within the specific ecosystem in which they survive. Now here, if we take a look at all of the animals below, we can see a hawk in this picture, an owl in this picture, a pack of wolves, and I believe this is a Siberian tiger. So we can see that all of these are examples of predators, and a predator is a technical ecological niche. So all of these predators are adapted for finding, hunting, and killing other organisms that they do to survive. Now, because hawks, owls, tigers, and wolves all eat meat, they technically are in competition with each other. So because each of these organisms needs to compete to be able to find other animals to eat, this is an example of how animals can interact indirectly without eating or being eaten, because they all need to compete with each other for food. So how do each of these organisms do this? Well, let's look at the hawk and let's look at the owl for a second. The major difference between hawks and owls is the time of day that they hunt, that allow hawks and owls not to have to compete with one another because they operate at different times of the day. We can see the picture with the hawk is bright because hawks are defined as diurnal, meaning that they hunt during the day, whereas owls are defined as nocturnal because they hunt at night, because each organism or each predator has different adaptations that allow them to better survive at different times of the day. So the daytime, or time at which they are active, is part of their ecological niche. Wolves and the Siberian tiger demonstrate a different component based on how they hunt with other members of their population. So if we take a look at the wolves on the left, we can see that there's a group of wolves, which is what we call a pack. So wolves are an example of pack hunters that use overwhelming numbers in order to bring down a larger prey animal, such as this caribou here, whereas tigers are definitely not an example of a pack hunter. Tigers are solitary hunters that rely on ambush predation, surprising larger animals and catching them off guard and delivering a much more aggressive killing blow. We can see that this tiger has killed this deer here by going right for its throat like this. So we can see very, very different examples of behaviors between all four of these predator animals that technically should have to compete with each other but don't, because they possess different adaptations. And because their hunting is separated based on time of day or based on the numbers and tactics they use to hunt, each of these animals occupies a different ecological niche, even if they have similar roles. In the next video, we're going to look in more detail at why organisms need to eat, and for organisms that don't eat, how they compensate and get energy from a different source.